Now, I did speak with Niamh McAnally before. Her first book was a fascinating story of adventure on the high seas. It was called FLARES Up, and it followed the incredible journey of two Englishmen who rowed across the Atlantic in an old wooden boat, an ancient old thing. And Niamh met them quite by chance at the end of that trip, and she took a photo. And the photo led to the book. And Niamh, we did talk about that book at the time and talk about meeting the lads. Now, they also play a huge part in your new book, don't they? Good morning to you.
Good morning, PJ. Lovely to talk with you again. Yes, this story is in my memoir called Following Sunshine, a voyage around the mind, around the world, around the heart. And it's all started off with my idea behind traveling the world as a volunteer, which I did during the year of 2015, at the end of which I was about to settle down, get back to work. And I saw this one final project, which was to help a solo sailor crew his sailboat from Florida to the Bahamas. And it was only going to take a month. And what I learned was when you live 24/7 in a 40-foot space on the high seas, and you have to rely on your fellow mariner for your safety, you get to know each other from the inside out. We actually had a profound set of conversations on the boat. We realized that we had forged an amazing bond and a friendship which grew into a romance. And even at that point, we brought the boat back to Florida after 4 months, and he went back to his family in California. And I was heading to Ireland actually for a family reunion, and we'd said our goodbyes. And about 10 minutes after, I figured out that this was a very important person in my life, and that no matter what, even though it was kind of a fling, if you like, was over, it was, I became a better person as a result of it. And sure enough, 3 weeks later, he calls me up and he says, do you want to keep going sailing? And I went, yeah, why not? And we were 6 years living on the boat all together, down through the Bahamas and the Caribbean. And then in 2019, on the deck of the boat on Thanksgiving, he proposed.
Oh, could there be anything more romantic?
It was, oh my God, it was so amazing. Sun was setting and it was a nice, calm evening, and he proposed and we planned to get married. And of course, the following year, COVID struck. So it cancelled the major wedding we had planned in Ireland, which got put off for about a year and a half. And then finally we managed a beautiful wedding ceremony down in Wicklow with all of my family. And then we flew, literally hiked up the dress, got on an airplane and came to America to have a family wedding for his family.
Tell me about him and his family.
So Gary, he was born and raised over in Los Angeles. And believe it or not, at one point I was living in Marina del Rey, right there in LA, right around the time he was looking for his boat. And I don't know if you ever saw that movie, Sliding Doors, like, how life could change in an instant. And had we bumped into each other then, who knows what might have happened. But he got out of a long-term marriage, and he was retired from work, and he decided, I'm in my late 60s. It's time to do something that I really want to do. And he decided he'd learn how to sail, buy a boat and sail off into the sunset. And he had this idea. He goes, I'm going to take life easy. I'm going to have a girl in every port. And the way you're supposed to be careful what you ask for. So I said to him afterwards, I said, yeah, you got your girl in every port. You just got the same one.
It's a point. And when you said that to him, what did he say?
Oh, he's laughing ever since. I have a line in the book that says, Gary originally was allergic to pecans and relationships. And all I can tell you now is he's still allergic to pecans.
Talk to me then again about Paul and Phil and their remarkable story.
Yeah, so we were on the sailboat in Antigua in 2020 in February when Paul and Phil, two lads from Newcastle, had rowed ashore, having rowed 3,000 nautical miles across the Atlantic from the Canaries in the Talisker Whiskey Atlantic Challenge. And when they cross the finish line, they have this kind of Olympic podium moment where they light their handheld flares and they stand up and hold them up, and the media boat circles them. And I happened to take a photograph of them at the time, which was just a very moving, evocative photograph of that moment. And after they came ashore, Gary and I invited them onto our sailboat for their first home-cooked meal. And we started talking, and they learned that I was a writer, and we said that I would write their story, but not about how to row the ocean, but about why they did it, how it affected their families, and how the experience changed them as human beings. And when I finished writing that, and that was all out in the world, I went back to my memoir, Following Sunshine, and I brought the epilogue up to date to that moment of taking that photograph. So technically now, Following Sunshine serves as a prequel to Flares Up, if you like.
They had left, was it Tenerife, and rowed together.
Yes.
And they both had fascinating backstories.
They did indeed. Yeah, they left from the little island of La Gomera in the Canaries, and Paul was 55 and he was a firefighter and had suffered a brain hemorrhage, and decided when he, got a second chance at life, he was going to do something major with his life. And he decided, rowing across the ocean was a great idea, although he just had to learn how to row. and Phil, the partner he found, was 65 at the time, and he used to do an awful lot of adventure sports and challenges in honor of his disabled son. So they teamed up and they spent 70 days on the boat, rowing across the ocean. It was an extraordinary story.
You'd expect two fellas who'd done that to be kind of friends since childhood. They barely knew one another.
Yeah, they had never met. They lived in the same town. They had never met. And it was a mutual friend that connected them. And interestingly enough, they're both alpha males, and they realized very early on that they could only have one captain on the boat. So they decided Paul was going to be skipper, and they really worked well together as a team. It was a real lesson. A bit like, what we learned on living on a small boat is you have to work together.
Well, I'm thinking of the three people who might end up on the boat with me. My wife would never set foot on the boat. My two closest male friends, certainly one of them anyway, we'd kill each other within 2 days. We've been friends for 40 years. It takes a huge effort for two men who barely know one another to do this together, this massive physical challenge, which, let's face it, if the sea gets angry, she takes no prisoners.
Absolutely. There's nothing that you can do to control the ocean, let's put it that way. We had just done a 10-day passage ourselves from the Bahamas down to Puerto Rico, and it was pretty ugly out there. And I remember getting off the boat saying, if that was 2 open water passages and one, my first and my last, there's nothing you can do other than be prudent normally when you're before you would set sail. But in this case, the two lads in the rowboat, they were out there and they had like 2.5 months out there, so they just had to keep going.
It changed them both, I think, didn't it?
It certainly did. I mean, now they've come back to, it's about, actually next year it's going to be 5 years since they came ashore, and it really changed their relationships with their families. I think they really became more appreciative of people around them, and also the actual toll it took on their families, the worry and the concerns and everything like that.
They've faced everything from storms to seasickness to dehydration, and yet you keep coming back for more. You wonder what drives someone at that point, don't you?
You do, and I think, the interesting thing was Paul said one time we were doing an interview together, and people were asking him, because he was trying to set out to prove himself, because he was kind of bullied at school or that kind of thing. And after the 70 days, he kind of said, you know what, I realized I was always good enough. And it was kind of a funny moment where he turns around and he goes, so really I probably wasted 70 days of my life. And I looked at him and I said, Paul, thanks a lot. I said, if you wasted 70 days, I wasted almost 2 years of my life writing the book.
The boat itself, it was an ancient old thing.
Yes, it was a wooden boat. It actually was the last wooden boat to do this race back in 2019. They don't use wooden boats anymore. And so it was its 4th time crossing the ocean as, people rowing it. But it never once actually capsized during that period. Now, other boats have capsized in that race, but theirs never did. It was amazing.
You're still in touch with them?
Oh, absolutely, all the time. All the time. We do various promotions, and I do a lot of book club talks, for their whole story as well. And people love it. It's interesting because it's a story that resonates with men and women. Most books are, a lot of women read the books, but I found with the book clubs, it's both men and women are really enjoying their story.
If you hadn't invited them to join you for dinner, there'd be no book.
There wouldn't. And the interesting thing for them was that they said, well, when they got back, they were expecting to do, go on the talk circuit and tell their story. But of course, it was right into COVID. And so everything was shut down for that next year and a half. And so they said, without the book, our story would have just died. So it was a pleasure to be able to keep their story alive, and it's given them, they still do talks now in England about their story. And it's very impactful because it tells, if you set your mind to something, and I think what's relatable about it, and for all of us, these kind of stories, is that no matter what the goal you set yourself, if you can look at their story and push past whatever obstacle stands in your way, it leads to that kind of better life that you're looking to live.
What one word would sum them up? Resilience, determination, what?
Determination, probably, or what is it?
Doggedness. Yeah.
Doggedness, thank you. yeah, for sure. Resilience, though.
That decision that you made to invite them for dinner, like, that was your slight moment. What was it just that big because you're a nice Irish person, or what? Or were you curious, or what?
It's funny. When I took the photograph of them with their flares up, I started crying, and I turned around to Gary and I said, this moment will live with me for the rest of my life. I just felt connected to it in some very emotional way. And we also heard that they had no family on the island to greet them. So they were kind of on their own, their big push, and here they were. So that's when we said, well, come on over. We'll cook you dinner and let's chat about your experience.
They could just as easily have said, no, we'll go for a pint.
Exactly.
It's a remarkable story, Niamh. And of course, I said this before too, there is a Netflix documentary series in this.
Well, we hope so. I'm working on adapting the book, hopefully, into a screenplay.
We look forward to that. Great to talk again, and every success with the new book.
Thank you so much, PJ. Lovely to talk with you.
And with you, Niamh McAnally, the writeronthewater.com is her website, and that new book of hers, Following Sunshine, is out on the 12th of September. Kenny's.ie or Hodges Figgis, where you can, or through any other good bookshop, but check her website. Great story. That will make, someday, it's going to make one hell of a Netflix documentary. Can I recommend a Netflix show to you, by the way? I've started now again watching the telly.